Update. Am I the a-hole because I don't want my half-brothers to come on a trip with my uncle and I? Original post. I, 15 male, have 3 older half-brothers. Twins Max and Jake, 18 males, and Shane, 16 male. We have the same mother, but they have a different father. Max, Jake, and Shane's father is very involved in their lives, and they live with him every other week. On the other hand, I have a deadbeat, absent father that I never see. I have no relationship with my half-brother's father. My half-brothers definitely do not treat me the same way they treat each other. I have friends who have older brothers who are supportive, hang out with them, and are there for them, but mine are nothing like that. Often when Max, Jake, and Shane are at their dad's, I spend the weekend with my uncle, my mom's brother. Because of that, my uncle and I are very close. One of the things we do together is watch Nascar since he's made me a fan. It's our thing. As far as I know, my half-brothers don't watch NASCAR. I've never watched a race with them at least. Next week, Max, Jake, and Shane were supposed to be at their dad's. My uncle was going to take me to the NASCAR race in Atlanta that weekend, just him and me. However, my brother's dad has to go away on a business trip, meaning they aren't going to their dad's next week. Since they'll be here, my uncle also invited them to come to the Atlanta race with us. I don't want them to come. When they went to Europe, Florida, skiing, New York, or any of the other trips they take with their dad, I didn't get invited. They go away with him 2 or 3 times a year. I've never been away because my mom can't afford it. This will actually be my first time on a plane. They get everything. This was one thing I had, just my uncle and me, and he just invited them. Since they're going, I no longer want to go, and I'm considering telling my uncle that tomorrow. When he told me they were coming, he could see I wasn't happy. He knows how I feel about my relationship with them. But he said, since they're home, he can't not invite them. It wouldn't be fair. But it's not my fault their dad is going away. I know my uncle can't uninvite them now, so I really think I just prefer to stay home and not go. Would I be the a-hole if I told my uncle I don't want to go and instead stayed home? Not going is very much a cutting off your nose to spite your face move. I completely understand the desire, but it only means your half-brothers get yet another thing you miss out on, and this time, it was your own choice. You'll damage your relationship with your uncle, and sow the seeds for even deeper resentment. Ideally, your uncle would recognize the action as the cry for help that it is and take action to help you feel better, but the fact is, that's more likely to happen if you communicate your feelings clearly than if you stubbornly deny yourself the trip. Definitely don't want to damage my relationship with my uncle. For what it's worth, I also don't want to make my relationship with my half-brothers worse than it is either. No a-holes here. I understand your half-brothers are enjoying things you're not because of their dad. However, you have to look at this from your uncle's perspective. He has 4 nephews. Not 1 nephew and 3 half-nephews, but 4. He is helping his sister by providing things for you because she can't afford trips, while her other kids are getting very nice trips. If he were to only take 1 nephew, the other 3 may feel as if you are being favored over them. If you truly don't want to go, then don't, but you shouldn't let the presence of your half-brothers ruin something that you would enjoy. Now for the update. After reading the comments, I realized it wasn't my place to ask my uncle not to invite my brothers, as he is also their uncle. Also, if I chose not to go, I would just be denying myself something I really wanted to do and would upset my uncle, which I didn't want. So I decided to go to the NASCAR race. I also decided against saying anything further at that time. In the days before we left, it felt like my brothers were being nicer than usual, so that was cool. They added me to their group chat so that it would be easier to keep in contact on the trip, the reason they gave. I roomed with one of my older brothers, Max, in the hotel. On Saturday, we went to the racetrack for the first races. I was getting food when I accidentally cut the line. I thought the people standing in front had already ordered. Someone pointed it out to me, and I went to the right spot in line. There was a guy in line who was super mad, going on about how I was a little a-hole and only apologized because I got caught. He walked up to me yelling. Then Max appeared and told the guy to calm down and to stop yelling at me. He kept yelling at me, and Max stood between me and the guy and told him, "If you say another thing to my little brother, we're going to have a problem." The guy finally backed off. I've never seen Max as mad as he was right then over that guy yelling at me, and it meant a lot the way he jumped in. Back in our hotel room that night, I was thanking Max again for standing up for me earlier, and he told me that as his brother, he'd always do that for me. It seemed like the right moment, so I finally took the advice and opened up to him. I told him that I wished he, Jake, Shane, and I hung out more together, and that I'd like to do more stuff with them. We talked for a long time about our relationship. Max then talked to Shane and Jake, because the next day, they both apologized for me having felt left out as well. When we flew back home, Max had told Jake more of what I had said. He asked me if he could first. Jake and I went out on Tuesday and talked about it a bunch, and he kept apologizing for letting me down. I told him it was probably mutual and that I didn't act like I wanted to spend time with them. But he told me he was my big brother and should have been better. We've all agreed to do better going forward. Kind of funny that it was a drunk guy yelling at me that got me to open up in the end. This is the best update I've ever seen on here. Thank you for taking the time to update. I've been wondering how everything went. I'm really glad you enjoyed the racing and also that your brothers will try to include you more. Cheers, mate. The races were so cool to see in person. My driver almost won on Sunday too. I've noticed that a great way for family to mend an issue is coming together because of an outsider. I think it takes a them to bring out the sense of us. I've never had a stranger shout at me in public like that before. I'm glad he walked away after Max said that, because I'm pretty sure Max was serious about there being a problem if he shouted at me again. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not taking one for the team and not paying for my sister-in-law and her family to come on our spring break trip? Twice a year, my wife, 3 kids, and I go on a trip with just us. During spring break, it is a domestic trip. During the summer, it is an international trip. These 2 trips are my favorite things we do throughout the year. We live very frugally throughout the year, but during these trips, we go all out. The money for the trips comes from separate, non-marital passive income I have from a family commercial real estate business. And in case anyone mention it, we have a prenup. After our trip last summer, my sister-in-law, wife's sister, told my wife that she and her husband were going to save up and come on next year's trips, the 2025 trips, with their 2 kids. My wife didn't push back. I heard about this a couple of months later and was quite frustrated. I do not like my sister-in-law at all. It's a long story. My wife convinced me to be okay with it by explaining that they would get their own accommodations and that aside from some shared meals, I wouldn't need to spend much time with her. Well, in January, my brother-in-law's job issued a return to the office directive. He had been working remotely and lived out of state from his office. They offered a short window for anyone who did not want to return to resign and receive a good severance package. He resigned and took the severance. After that happened, they decided they could not come on the trip. There is a chance they will need to sell their house and move in with my in-laws. About 2 weeks ago, my mother-in-law, wife, and sister-in-law were spending the day together. My sister-in-law kept bringing up how upset she was about the whole situation and how much she had been looking forward to the trip. My mother-in-law pulled my wife aside and said, "I know y'all can pay for the trip. Just pay for it." So my wife offered for us to pay for it. After my wife told me this, I was livid. I said, "You want me to pay for the terrible experience of doing this trip with your sister? No, I will not do it under any circumstances. This is a 2 yes and 1 no situation. I am a no, so she isn't coming. My wife thinks I should take one for the team and pay. I refuse. I do feel bad for her kids, but I am not paying for the displeasure of being around my sister-in-law. Heck, I have even offered to take just her kids on a trip. I would be fine with that. They can stay with us. But right now, I am left with either effectively doubling the cost of the trip or having them stay with us, which goes against the reason I agreed to let her come in the first place. Am I the a-hole? Now for the comments. If mother-in-law wants her to go so bad, she can pay for them. Not the a-hole. You start this and they will expect to go on every vacation you go. Your sister-in-law's finances aren't your responsibility. Paying sets a bad precedent, and you even offered to take her kids. Your money, your choice. Hope she won't be able to figure out how to access it if she's motivated. Unless she is willing to commit bank fraud, she cannot access it. She is not on the account at all. And if she did that, it would be immediate divorce in a state with no alimony. Does sister-in-law work or is she a stay-at-home mom? She is stay-at-home mom. They have a 3-year-old. You're the a-hole. Sounds like you can easily afford to help them out. You just don't want to because it would be a terrible experience for you. This is not for your sister-in-law. It is for your wife and her relationship with her family. By helping out the sister-in-law, you're letting your wife come through for her family and enjoy the trip without feeling guilty about her sister the whole time. I rather get hit in the gonads than go on a trip where I am paying for my sister-in-law to be my company. I put up with being around her enough. Next story. Am I the a-hole for saying I wouldn't take care of my sister's kids and doing what I said? So, my sister Linda, 30, and I, 22, female, have never had a good relationship. We have been arguing for as long as I can remember. She loves being around people, and when we lived together, she would often invite friends and our family over. We always had something to celebrate. I don't like all that. I prefer silence. She also often borrowed my things, and her friends would come into my room without asking, etc. When I was 16, we had a huge fight about her wedding. Since then, I have limited my contact with her. I never speak to her first, and we never talk at family gatherings. I haven't gone to her birthday party for years, and I haven't invited her to mine. I also barely know her children, 5 males and 3 females. I mostly see them only during the holidays. But on February 15th, my mother told me that Linda would be bringing her children the next day and that I would take care of them. I was confused. I never agreed to this, and I already had plans for that day. I said I wouldn't do it. My mother said she'd talk to Linda. Then Linda called me and said she was going to drop the kids off anyway. I said that if she did that, her kids would be home alone. She didn't care. The next day, Linda showed up with her children. She tried to explain their schedule to me, and every time, I told her, I'm leaving the house. I'm not taking care of your children. She didn't listen to me and left. After about 10 to 15 minutes, my friend showed up. I sent Linda a picture of me sitting in their car and said, take your kids. I'm leaving. I also sent this to her husband and then turned off my phone. When I returned at 8 p.m., my parents were quiet, but I could tell they were not happy. The next day, Linda showed up at our house and started yelling at me. She called me lazy and said I could have hurt her kids. I said I did exactly what I said I would do. We argued for about 2 hours, but when I asked her where she had to go and why she chose me of all people, she couldn't answer and just started yelling at me again. I later told my friends about it, and they were divided. Some said I had done nothing wrong, but others were a bit annoyed, and said that if they had known we were leaving the kids, they wouldn't have gone anywhere with me. Just to clarify, the reason I didn't leave right away was because A, I still wasn't ready, and B, my friends weren't there yet. I also didn't let Linda into the house. She has the keys. It is not my house, it is our parents' house. Why would Linda or your mom try to force you to watch kids given your relationship with Linda? Asinine. Not the a-hole. Your mom and Linda put Linda's kids at risk. You did exactly what you said you were going to do, and had you stayed and watched them, this would have been the first of a long line of stomped boundaries. I wish I knew because she had never tried it before. Info. Because I'm nosy, if you don't mind sharing, what was the wedding day fight about? She wanted to have her wedding on the other side of the country, in her husband's parents' city. At that time, I didn't know I had IBS, but traveling was a huge problem for me, and I said I didn't want to do it. Then it also turned out that she wanted to put me in the same room as her husband's cousin, who was older than me. I wasn't her bridesmaid or anything, so I wanted to wear a plain blue dress, but she said no. She chose a dress for me that, A, was expensive, and she expected me to cover at least 50% of it. B, was a total nightmare that had everything I hate. Elbow-length sleeves, bows, a cream color, and barely reached my knees. She also wanted me to wear jewelry, even though she knew it always caused sensory problems for me and made me scratch myself until there was blood. Linda wanted to have her speech, and during it, she wanted our family picture on the wall. She wanted to take some from my private album, but I refused. She also wanted to place me between her husband's parents, literally between them. On my left, his mother, on my right, his father, and some other things. It all sounded like a nightmare, so I told her I wouldn't come. She didn't like that answer. Last story. Am I the a-hole for showing my dad proof that my mom would have been disgusted with him giving my half-sister any of her jewelry? My mom died when I, 18 female, was 11. My dad started another relationship a year later, got remarried when I was 14, and my half-sister was born a few months later. When she was 2, my dad made a big deal out of choosing a ring and a necklace that had been my mom's and saving them for my half-sister. At the time, I asked my dad what he was thinking and why he wouldn't let me have all of it. My mom had already given me the things she most wanted me to have, but as her only child, I thought it made sense that I'd get the rest. My dad said we were both his daughters, and he did it because he wanted to share his love for my mom with my half-sister. We fought over his decision, and I told him I'd never support it. I also said that if he had any more daughters, I wouldn't support it then either. Right now, he has my half-sister 4 and my half-brother 18-month-old. Around that time, I had started reading the journals my mom kept when she was sick. She was sick for about 5 months overall. Her journals showed how scared she was, but they also shared how certain she was that my dad would marry again and have more kids, and how sad it made her. The one thing that luckily didn't happen was another woman moving into the home she had made perfect for us, because we moved after she died. But she wrote a few pages about hoping that his new wife and any future kids wouldn't get her things. She wanted everything to go to me, if my dad didn't want to keep some of it and then pass it on to me. She even wrote about this in the page where she mentioned gifting me the jewelry she did. She wanted me to have a memory of her sharing that with me, and she didn't think giving a 10 or 11-year-old all that jewelry at once would have made sense. She even wrote that she talked to my dad about wanting me to have all of it. I sat on it for so long because I didn't want the fight that I knew would happen when I made him confront it. But recently, I brought it up. I moved in with my grandpa in November when I turned 18, and the space from my dad helped some. But when my dad came to see me a couple of weeks ago, he told me he wanted me to embrace the fact that my half-sister has some of my mom's jewelry, and he wanted me to show her the things I have when she's a little older, so we could connect over it. That's when I brought up what my mom wrote, and I even showed him. He asked me where I got the journals, and I said they were in a box of papers and other things. I told him he knew my mom had wanted me to have it all, and I said that her words and how often she brought it up showed that she would be disgusted by his decision, just like I was. My dad got upset and told me it was cruel to throw this in his face. We argued about it. He was hurt. He said that seeing my mom write so much about how much she didn't want him to find happiness with anyone else or have more children stung, that he would have wanted that for her. And the fact that I was so happily throwing all of that in his face, along with the fact that this all started because an innocent little girl got some jewelry, made him incredibly disappointed in me. I told him I wasn't going to let him believe that my mom would have wanted or supported this. My dad's wife was mad about his emotional state after he got home. Apparently, the journals bothered him, and the fact that I took the stance I did angers her, because she feels like I'm being selfish and cruel to my half-siblings. She didn't explain why. She also thinks I'm being unfair to my dad, who now has 3 kids instead of just me, and who wanted to share his love for my mom with their kids, something she struggled with but ultimately understood. She texted me a few nights ago, telling me that my dad is losing sleep over it all now, and it's all my fault. She sarcastically said I should be proud of myself. Am I the a-hole? Share his love with all his kids. All of your mom's belongings are yours alone. That's how it should have been, but that won't be happening now. You need clear boundaries with your father. This is super damaging. You're only 18. He may have moved on, but the loss of your mom will stick with you for the rest of your life. That's something I'll need to work on for sure. I'm getting better at it, I think, but lots of room to grow and improve. Not the a-hole. Why is he sharing your mom's love with kids who didn't even know her? All the jewelry should be yours, and I hope you get the items back that he's given to your half-sister. Right now, it's not looking likely. He seems to want me to give in and let my half-sister keep them.